It's nice to see everyone here. We're here to discuss the topic of dual heritage. So people who have parents from two different races. And we have a cross-section of guests, all lovely people who I shall now ask to introduce themselves. Could we begin with you, Michael?
Hello, my name is Michael. I am dual heritage. My mum is white British and was born in Newcastle. My dad was part of the Windrush generation. He came from Jamaica when he was 16 and he moved to London. And yeah, that's me.
G, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, my name's G. I was born in Hertfordshire, North Londonish, and now live in Buckinghamshire. My parents, my mum is white British and my dad is Black Caribbean. My grandparents were from Antigua and St. Kitts. I never met them because they unfortunately died before I was born. So I don't have a massive Caribbean family, but I've always been interested in my heritage. Yeah, that's me really.
Lee, do you want to go take it away?
Yo, okay. Hi guys, my name is Lee Redhead. I'm dual heritage. My mum is white British and my dad is Grenadian. Yeah, what else do you need to know? I'm a graffiti artist by trade. So yeah, I work as an artist. What else do you need me to say?
That's great. And Natasha?
Hi, yeah, I'm Natasha Mills. I'm a physiotherapist and a coach, personal performance coach and corporate and executive coach and NLP practitioner, former B-girl. And yeah, I'm a mixed race. I have a mum born in Yorkshire, and but I was born in Coventry, and my grandparents on that side are from Scotland. So I have a great connection to my Scottish heritage. I know far back, I've got the whole family tree of that, so I'm really connected to that side. And then my dad's from Guyana, so Caribbean, South America. Never actually been there. He moved over at 14. I've met him at 16. Met a lot of my family on that side, and actually my grandma hadn't seen her in a long time, but she died during the COVID. So again, that's another topic that's kind of touched on people of dual heritage and how it actually affects us over the last couple of months.
And Callum?
Hey, I'm from Nottingham. My mum is white British. My dad was also born in Nottingham, but my grandparents are from St. Kitts.
All right, great. Okay, well, welcome everyone. Oh, sorry, yeah, but my name's Tom. My mum's from Southern Ireland and my dad is from Sierra Leone, and I'm Newcastle based as well. Just to start the conversation off then, one thing that I've noticed over the years that has changed is exactly how the words that we use to define what we're now calling dual heritage. I mean, back when I was a kid, you had words like mulatto, you had half caste, which I never liked. And then you go mixed race and then dual heritage. What to each of you is how do you like to be defined? If someone's referring to you, I mean, are you one of these people who likes to be called a BAME? You know, all these different terms that fly around, and there's, you know, what's the politically correct thing to say? And it's really in the eye of the beholder. And I wondered what each of you, how you, when you are describing yourself to someone, or when someone refers to you, or you see something on a form, what is it that you tick? How do you perceive yourselves within this whole dual heritage, mixed race genre, as it were? Who wants to take it away?
Yeah, I'm all right taking that. Oh, sorry, Michael. So I actually run the BAME network at University of Warwick, and I'm part of the Racial Equality Task Force group as well. And I'm totally in alignment with the whole thing of BAME situation kicking off at the moment, because actually what we're realizing is that people are speaking on behalf of each other and grouping us all together and treating us all the same, but we're all so different and we've all got different experiences. I don't mind the mixed race. I hate half caste. I think it's old. I never liked it as a child. Yeah, and but I love, and I know a lot of people are not happy with this, but I love people of color. I love being called a woman of color, a person of color, because there's a movement at the minute where people are like, I don't see color, and it's like, I'm all right with you seeing it. I love it. I'm happy being like this, you know, see it, but just don't treat me any different. So I think that's how I identify, really.
Yeah. How do you feel, Callum? What's your take on it?
For me, in terms of race, I'm black. Like obviously, like in terms of scientific, obviously I'm a mix of black and white, but in terms of race, in terms of identity, I identify as black.
Yeah. Lee?
Yep.
Where do you stand?
I'm the same, to be honest. I myself, I identify as black. Growing up, obviously going up through school and whatever, I grew up in a really multicultural area, which I'm quite thankful for. So in my old school, like I went through the whole process of being called, like I'd called myself half caste for a long time as a kid, but as it got to a point where I was like, yeah, I don't really like saying this, and I went to saying mixed race and rare, but not for me. I've always identified myself as a black man.
Yeah. G, how do you see yourself?
I've always said to other people, oh, I'm mixed race, if that came up, if they wanted to know. But I always thought that I've always had this idea that people see me as black, and that's fine, because I didn't want to be like, I'm not black, because it's not something that you don't not want to be. But at the same time, we've had the conversation in my house where if it comes up with my mum, she says, oh, I don't want you to say that you're just black, because she feels like it eclipses her from her children. And she's said that like a couple of times now. So if I was with her and stuff, like I'd be like, yeah, I'm mixed race. And I think I feel mixed race because I've grown up on a very white, like with like all white friends and mainly white family. Like I said earlier, my dad's family is not very like prominent in my life as much. So I do feel both. Like I really do. And then like what I said about my mum making the point that she feels like eclipsed if I was to just say I was black. But I don't like saying, oh, I'm not black, because I just think that's ridiculous, because that's what I look like. But then I also think like the whole, just to make it even more complicated, the whole like white and black thing, like just words anyway. But it does mean something to people. So like you do need to have, and like it's too late to not have a classification. But yeah, like as I said starting off, I've always gone with mixed race, and that's I don't mind that word. I don't like half caste. It's outdated. Yeah.
All right, and Michael, where do you sit on this one?
So for me, it's really interesting because obviously before I grew up in an area that was predominantly white. I was the only person of colour there, and I always said I was half caste, and I didn't realise it was offensive. It was just because that's how people refer to me. I've got family in London, so then when I went to London, I should say, that's when I realised actually that's not the word that people think is okay. So that's when I started identifying myself as mixed race. But again, that changed as time got on, because the example I always use when I work with young people, we talk about heritage and colour, and it's all about how people see you. Barack Obama is the first black president. He's not the first mixed race president. And that's what I always hold on to. And that's me in an example. I'm black because that's how people see me, not because they know me, but I'm mixed race. But whenever I go anywhere, I am a black man, and that's how the world will see me. So that's fine with me, because that's who I am. I am a black man. I'm a white man for some people, because some people don't see colour in my family, I should say. But the outside world will always see me as a black man. So I am a black man.
Yeah, I think it comes from, there's some, I was talking to someone the other day who was saying that it stemmed from some sort of rule in America, this one drop rule, where if you had one drop of Negro blood, then you were classed as black. And those white people and people on one drop of Negro blood, they were black. And I certainly see myself as a black person. I sort of think of people like Bob Marley, who, he's mixed race, Barack Obama mixed race, but I think that there's a way of looking at yourself sometimes where some people are in a position whereby they really, I think a lot of younger people like millennials really do feel, who are mixed race and dual heritage, they really do feel half and half. They really do feel half and half, some of them. And it's something I've never really got my head around. I was hoping today will help me get my head around that a bit, because I always just think, oh, I'm a black man, that's it, But it's an interesting topic, because I think that there's so many different strands to it. And when I was talking to someone about the other day, was an interesting one. They said, has there ever been a time when you've played to the white side? When you know, like how if you get in a taxi sometimes and the taxi driver's got a really strong regional accent, you'll drop into your really strong regional accent when you talk to him. Have you ever had that happen racially, whereby you're in a situation where you're with a load of white people or you're with a load of black people and you seem to become blacker or you seem to become whiter when you're in that position? Is there any sort of shifting?
Yeah, I call it code switching.
Code switching, that's it. Yeah.
Because you just and my therapist, the staff that I work with, they do the same thing because we're dealing with people, clients. So one of my black therapists is like, hello, how are you doing? Come in, like really, and we're like, oh, ease up on that a little bit. But actually, it's the way he feels that he needs to be perceived by his clients. Because, you know, if he does talk how he talks to me, they will treat him very differently. And I feel I do it. I feel at home when I work in physiotherapy, and we're still only 8%. That are even BAME, let alone if they break the numbers down. Me and I was in a room with 48 physios the other day on a Zoom call for the first time in 11 years. I was in a room full of people of colour, and we all finally picked up the phone to each other as well and had conversations, and we were like, yeah, did you hear what's going on? Like just talking like how we would and felt really comfortable. But if we spoke like that to a bunch of physiotherapists, even in the like in the Facebook group, we were told it's not a place to talk about this stuff. We don't need to be bringing that up. And then when we used the language they like, they called us very eloquent. So that's the word we've been given. You spoke very eloquently. And I think because I have such a profession, and I'm not in hip hop culture anymore, I feel like I can't always be myself. I have to fit in. And I've had a lot of problems in work because the real me comes out every now and then, quite a lot.
How are things for you, Lee? You know, with doing the graffiti and that, do you find you can just roll as a black man, or do you have to? Is there any time when you see an advantage in you know, in leaning on your sort of white heritage?
It's a weird thing for me. Like for me, I'll be honest. Like there's been situations like I feel very uncomfortable in a lot of in like a professional arena, if that makes sense, you know. So like for me, like there's, say if there's a situation where there's like I'm with a client or potential client or something, there's like a dinner or something like that, like a situation there, like I'm very uncomfortable in talking like that and being in that kind of sense, and it's taken me a long time to kind of find my own in them situations. I do find when I get a new client, I tend to try and curve my language sometimes, just to make myself seem a lot more approachable and this and this. But like honestly, like for me like I've grown up, and the way it's a weird one for me. Like I fully understand that I've got white heritage, you know. But when I meet people see me as black, you know, like you know, like although like you know, even though I've got a straight nose and whatnot, like there's been plenty of times when I've been in them circles where I've got to quote act white and this, that, and the other, but it's never really been a thing where like I've always felt like I've had to overextend myself, you know. Like I've had to like I've always found that if I just act as how I am, you know, be me, that's when I tend to be the most confident. If I'm in a situation where I have to say put on an accent or this and this, that's when that's when things for me seem to drop off a little bit for me. I don't know, it's really weird. It's a weird kind of for me it's a bit of a weird question, because I don't really know how to quote act white or act black, you know.
It's rolling with your natural black.
Yeah, I just kind of fall into who I am, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How about you, Callum? Have you had any experiences where you've you know, you found yourself sort of caught between two posts, as it were?
Yeah, I mean, I think even the language that we're kind of using here is an example of internalized racism. The fact that we consider sounding English as something that is white. Like, I was born here, my dad was born here. So why do we equate things like being well-spoken, being polite, being intelligent? Why, when we talk about these things, do we kind of attribute them to being white? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's kind of ingrained in us from the day one, which is a really dangerous thing. And I think it kind of stems back to what we have to talk about when we say mixed race, because we like G was saying, her mum wants her to identify that white side, but we have to kind of think about why whiteness was even a thing. And the reason why it was brought about was to oppress people. That was why they made that distinction. So I think it's really important to kind of go back into the history of why whiteness and blackness exists, and why whiteness, like you say, the one drop rule, like the identity of being mulatto. Whiteness is not accommodating. It does not see you as half white and say, yeah, this person's white, in the same way that you can be half black and be seen as black. So I think, yeah, it's a really one aspect of a much larger thing that needs to be spoken about, I think.
Adamuyuki, you're back with us. Are you with us?
I believe I'm back.
Ah, you're back now. You're back and
Oh my God, that was a whole moment.
I shall just take my temporary host hat off here and I'll put it on your head, put it back to you, because you're the boss of this.
No, it sounds like your was on a flow. I guess I can just listen in. We've had the introduction and we're talking about the different spaces with being white, and Callum was just talking about accommodation in those terminologies. I guess we're on the topic of terminologies.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, just to talk about we start off talking about situations about sort of being dual heritage and mixed race, and you know, are there times when it pays you to pander more to the white side, or do you just roll with the black side? How does it sort of go?
Yeah.
You know? Because I mean, when I was a kid, I've always remember this one time when someone said to me, it's one of the most racially offensive things that's ever been said to me. Someone said, but you're not black, man. You're not black. This is with someone at school, and the inference of that was, because you are mixed race, you are only partially black, so you're a bit white, so you're a bit more like me, so you're all right. You're not like the black people who are like, you're a little bit nearer white people, therefore that makes you better. What have you got to complain about? That sort of hierarchy, I think, the whole dual heritage mixed race thing in England, maybe not as much now as it did when I was a kid back in the 70s, but it sits in that zone in the mind of a lot of white English people, of that mind, that even though they may not overtly want to admit it, they feel, as Callum was saying, that there's something inherently great about being white, and that is what we should aspire to, you know. And it's a funny thing to be so when you're sort of dual heritage and you're caught in between that sort of that dynamic, you know, when you grow up as a kid, somewhere within that dynamic, and it's subliminally all around you. I just think it's a very interesting thing, but it was also the most offensive thing I think I've ever had said to me. That's how I felt.
Can I just jump in off the back of that, just because I feel like that's a really interesting point, but I think it's also in the term of the question, like black or where do you go, black or white? As in, I was raised by the white side of my family. I know for a fact that none of them see me as anything other than their nephew, their son, their cousin, until something bad happens to me, and then that's when they go, that now you are black, if that makes sense, because they will have to then either defend or justify or defend their racism. So if they say something that is racist, like you just said, they will say, yeah, but we're not talking about you because you're one of us. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic, because I don't think it's a us or them thing or white or black thing. I think it's a human being thing about how we connect with other people. We want to connect with people on similarity, and the first similarity is either your accent. So I've had quite a lot of, when I've spoken to someone on the phone, and then you've got to tick a box, you don't sound black. Yeah. Or the same way as that when I meet someone and I've organised a meeting, I turn up and they go, oh, that's not, I didn't think you'd look like that. And you go, oh, okay. And I think that's when we can get to a point where it, like I can't remember who said it, where we're just people, and I'm a black person, you're a white person, but there isn't a stereotype about what a black person is or what a white person is. That's when we can start then having real conversations about how things change and how we can move on to things that are better, if that makes sense.
I'll say I'm a professional code switcher. In the sense that coming from Nigeria, growing up in Nigeria, and then kind of growing up here as well, and then going into the world of dance, and this will segue into the next line of questioning, which is about disconnect and connect, and I think we've already touched upon it. As I studied dance for 4 years, I almost felt like I became disconnected from my blackness because I wasn't around hardly any black people. So I started to feel a bit disconnected. I started to feel a bit disconnected from men as well. And what it meant to how to interact with men. Because for 4 years, and in college as well, and in high school as well, I was surrounded around a lot of women. So there's a conversation on disconnect, and I want to bring that conversation into race, and into the conversation on dual heritage. And I question if we've come to conclude on the terminologies of mixed race or dual heritage, and if the term mixed race, if race in the mixed race is problematic, if we've concluded that in this conversation yet. Maybe we should start with that. Have we concluded, should we abolish that, Callum?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask what you mean when you said that you felt like you lost a connection with your blackness, that you felt like you lost a connection with, and also when you say you felt unsure of how to connect to men, how you feel like you have to connect differently to men and women, like how those things are created for you.
That's an interesting conversation. I think as a young man growing up, I grew up in Manchester, and I lived a life of partying and going crazy and always being with my friends. And then my heart was in dance. And I got to university level, I learned a lot more about feminism. My eyes opened a little bit more to women and to understanding women's issues and seeing the world from that lens. 4 years in university, just being around women and interacting with women, and I became a lot more silent around my male friends when I was around them. And in terms of, even from college, I started to notice that I might be coming, I wasn't really eating my traditional food anymore because some of it was heavy, and I'm a dancer, and I was starting to feel disconnected in that way. I was starting to feel disconnected because maybe I was out of the loop of the banter and the current. I started to feel disconnected in that sense. I went to university, I never joined ACS because I was already disconnected, I felt.
Can I say something? Yeah. I think it's interesting because what you were saying about how, like, what makes you feel black, like, I grew up in like this like very well-spoken area, and I'd say people would say I'm quite well-spoken. And if I'm with my cousin who lives in London, like me and my brother went to university in London as well. Like he changes his voice around his friends. Like he's got predominantly Asian and black friends. He went to a really multicultural uni, but I was in Newcastle, which was not so much. So my uni friends were very much like my school friends. So I don't think my voice changed or anything. But if I was to then be like, oh, I want to change, I don't feel like I should have to change my voice to be black. Like, why can't I just be black and speak well-spoken? Like, if I don't eat the traditional food because I don't have grandparents that cook me this food. So, like, does that mean I can't say, like, I'm black? because I feel like I'm black because I love certain music, like in a way that I think other people don't, and I think that's to do with my roots. Although like music's different, anyone can like any kind of music, whatever. But I still feel black, but I don't think I speak black. I don't think I eat black. Like I don't think I have like all these ties that I perform. I don't think that doesn't make me black, and that's what you were just saying kind of made me think a bit like, I don't think you should feel like bad that you don't like, I don't think being black has like a set of things like what you were saying, when you see people as people, like you need to just be you, and you don't live in a place where everyone's black, so why are you going to act like what you think black is all the time? Like we've all moved around, we live in a multicultural society. We either grew up with white people around us, we grew up with black people, we grew up with both, so why can't we use both in us to be like who we are? And that's when I'm like, I don't want to be like, but at the same time, I know I've played up my white side when I'm in a group, when I'm in this like situation at home. Like I worked in this bar with the people were quite stuck up, and I put on my best voice because I thought that they would look at me and think that I was uneducated because I was working in a bar. I was like hospitality. I thought they'd be like, she didn't go to uni, and I know what in this area what these people are like, and I experienced racism from these people, and I kept working at this bar anyway. And I always thought that they would look at me and think, she's not educated. So I'd before they could even say anything, I'd open my mouth and be like, try and show them that I am, kind of thing. So I get what, like, I completely get, like, you can up your like whiteness or blackness in different areas, but like you shouldn't have to. We only have to because of the stereotypes, and because people want to fit us in. People on both sides, black and white, want to fit us into these things to like keep us in this, like what you were saying earlier, like tribes. And it's just frustrating because it just makes it really difficult to navigate.
There's one thing that I think we all haven't mentioned that is the other big factor that is only happens in the UK, and I think that's why race is very different from America, and that's class.
It's
the class system.
Yeah.
I get less work because of, or not less work, I have to tone down my Northeast Geordie accent rather than being black sometimes or whatever it is. And I think that's the bigger part that plays. So like you were saying there, you have to speak a certain way. Again, it's class, because we think of black people have to speak like this, and that's because they're poor or they're from this area or from that area. Because when you say English or white or whatever it is, it's because they don't speak like that. Well, they do, and we do. And we should be proud to speak however we speak, but it's a class thing, and I think we'll have to sort of acknowledge that part of it, because that plays a major part of how class and race, especially in this country, is sort of how offensive race is and how it works. Because if you think of, I don't know, I haven't got the numbers in front of us, but working class people are far more likely to have mixed race children, have more interactions with people from diverse backgrounds than any other class. But you would perceive them as some of working class people as being the most racist when we talk about it, and that's the thing when you're playing up your blackness, playing up your whiteness. That's all rolled into it, isn't it?
And also the class is a real kind of integral part of being in the UK, but also racism in the UK, the way it was is that slavery was not talked about. It was distasteful. It was done somewhere else, not on our doorstep. We make a lot of money from it, we benefit from it, but we don't want to talk about it, not at our dinner table. We're not like that. And you've seen that by the statue that was ripped down in Bristol, because it's a philanthropist. I can never say that. So, you know, they made a lot of money so they could do a lot of good based on slavery. So they became seen as this amazing person who did a lot of good for people, and not as the terrible atrocities that happen. So you've got all these little nuances of being British, but then being in America, I've experienced just as much racism, because I used to date a Filipino guy and he's like, I shouldn't be dating you, because they don't like mixing their races, and being light-skinned black but fully black's really important, but being mixed race is also another part of America. So actually it is in every country, but actually there's a massive class thing that kind of does sit in the UK system that people have to just like navigate.
I
So
think,
good.
oh, sorry, you go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like Tom said earlier about the guy that said to you, "Oh, you're not black," and like it was a good thing. This place where I worked at the bar, I remember once it was a members club, so it was like this is in a place called Henley. It's like super posh. They're all old members. They're all rich because they paid to be there. And someone asked me where I was from, and I said I was mixed race. I don't know why, it was like my automatic thing. I was like, I have to say I'm white and black because they'll like me more. Like that was in my head. And then when I said I was mixed, they were like, oh, well, you're lovely. And it was so like loaded that it was like, oh, like they're seeing that I'm mixed and that's like special and exotic and whatever. So I really do think there is like a group of white people that just find mixed people so much more palatable. And it's like what you were saying about like, it's because they're like, oh, well, they must be better because they've got a bit of white in them. And I don't even think they realize that that's how they feel, but that is really how they feel. And when you realize that, that makes you not want to say you're mixed, because you're like, but like, you're like, no, I'm not good because I'm white. Like I'm good because I'm both, and I'm me, and because I'm black. Like, yeah.
We had that I want to have mixed babies thing. Oh, but mixed race babies are so cute.
That's a whole that's
a whole other conversation.
But what I was going to say is that I think sometimes we derail the racism conversation by talking about class.
Yeah.
But take into account the statistical economic disadvantage disproportionately affects Black people. So when we're talking about a race issue, we're talking about a class issue because they kind of go hand in hand. That's how racism works. But in talking about what G was saying, I think sometimes, or for me at least, as a mixed race person, we feel like we have to kind of prove our blackness. Like we feel like we're in the middle of this road and we have to prove our blackness. And I think in my experience, the more I've had these conversations with mixed race people, with Black people, the more I felt secure in myself as a person, regardless of as a Black, but also as a Black person. And once I feel secure in myself, that's when can I swear? That's when I don't give a, and I just can be me unapologetically without having to think about that sort of.
Can I talk on that bit actually? Like me, from thinking about where I grew up. In Sheffield, I grew up in Firth Park, Shire Green, Pitsmore, pretty much the main part of the city, pretty much, right? So, like when I went to my school, it was very mixed up, you know. Like you had a good proportion of Black, Asian, you know what I mean? It was really, really mixed up, you know. And for me, like I had a long time trying to figure out where I fit in with things, you know, because I had my white friends, I had my Black friends in there, like my white friends were like, this is what I'm saying, I'm not trying to stereotype anything like that, but back in my school days, my white side of my friends were all very geeky, and my Black side of my friends were all into sports, you know. So I was very into, like back in the day, that's why I really got into my basketball side of things. But then as well, I started to get into my art and this, that, and the other as well, you know. So it was kind of like a kind of weird time. But what I found is that while I was like, I'm talking like 13, 14, 15, school times, you know, you get influenced by a lot of things. And with me being so much into basketball and like not even realizing it at the time, but it's such like how much of an introduction into hip hop it is, you know, like I found that because I watched so much basketball, and basketball is an American sport, I found that American, like that, I found that American culture was a really big influence on me. And I think it really swayed my my opinion on myself and who I was in a way, because like I'm a British kid, doing nothing but watching American sitcoms, this, that, and the other, and it for a long time it made me exaggerate who I were, you know. Like for a long time as a kid, like I'd talk an American accent and not even a good one, you know. Like, you know, like this is what I'm saying. Like I used to, like, when I think back at it, I think, raw, like, was I really like that? You know, like, but that was because as a kid, I didn't really, like, my identity was all over the place. I didn't know how to act Black. I didn't know how to act white, you know, like, like when I think about my family, my mum's side is very small. My mum's British, and my mum's side is like it's a tiny side of the family. It's only like it's only like I've got like one auntie on that side, and that's pretty much one auntie, one uncle, and that's about it. My dad's side, you know, I've got cousins left, right, and centre. You know, like it's a madness. I've got cousins like in England, in Grenada, in Australia, or in America, all over the place. So I've always like put my put my identity through my black side, you know. But I've always kind of found that it's like it's taken a long time and a lot of lessons to kind of for me to kind of like figure out where I actually belong in everything. And yeah, like you were saying before, like I think it's like it gets to a point where you just got to represent yourself first and foremost, and then everything else comes after, you know. I don't know, it's like a weird, like it's I don't know, it's very like, I don't know, it's kind of weird. Like for me, I don't know, for some reason it's quite triggering for me. I don't know what it is. It's weird.
You shouldn't be forced to have to like choose.
Yeah.
And the world kind of, the society seems to, you need to choose because everything needs to be classified. And mixed doesn't cover it, because if you say you're mixed, you don't respect your black side enough. So what do you do? And I never thought I had any conflict until I got into more of these conversations, and then I was like, I don't really know the answer. I just want to be me. That's it. But yeah, doesn't seem like there is an answer.
Can I dive deeper into just try to clarify these terminologies? In this process, I've come to carry on some learning around the word, the term race, and I guess why we shouldn't apply it, because human race, and that's maybe the line of education that we should be leading. So I come to question if we should abolish term mixed race, because it still signify that we're not part of the human race, or we're mixing with, you know. I want to quickly touch on this because we're still on terminologies, and then I want to move on to dating, privilege, career, and challenges. And also in the conversation of terminologies, quickly touch on the BAME. And I'm throwing all these out here right now. Race, should we still be using the terminology mixed race? Or should we adopt wider, better dual heritage? I feel like that's, you know.
I like dual heritage a lot, actually, or like mixed heritage, because then it just feels like all I'm saying is like I have a lot of heritage. That's what it feels like, and I'm proud of that. So I like being like heritage. Like it sounds like that sounds nice to me. I don't know what everyone else thinks.
Yeah, I'm conflicted because when I talk about dual heritage, the thing that comes up in my mind is all the conversations that I have when I say, oh, I'm starting a people of color group or whatever, and then you get people that go, and I feel bad for saying this, but oh, I'm Irish, I experienced this, so can I join? And you're like, yes, you can join a group, but actually when you walk into a room, people still see you as white. It's only when you open your mouth that people then start putting labels on you. So it's like if we say dual heritage, then it can be people who are half Scottish, half Welsh, half French, half, you know, like there could be like so many nuances, which is great, but it also doesn't fully, for me, allow me to be heard, be seen with the challenges that truly reflect what I am. However, mixed race is a terminology, and the same with BAME, that other people have given to us. So it's really complex. So I kind of get it. I kind of get both, and I say dual heritage because it does sound nice. But my thoughts is that includes everyone, which is great. But then, can we still have the conversation?
Yeah.
Someone got
dual heritage. Sorry,
someone got annoyed at me once because there was a mixed race guy. He was Asian and white. And they were like, oh, the mixed race guy over there. And he was with a mixed race guy who was black and white. So I was like, oh, that guy. And then my Asian friend went, why does mixed race have to be black and white? Like, why does everyone think that? He got annoyed at me. And then I suddenly thought, oh yeah, mixed race isn't just black and white. Because I'm black and white, I always assume that's what people mean when they say mixed race. So like, yeah, your understanding of mixed race is like not always right, or like it's not covering everyone. Like the terms don't cover, they don't work. Like dual heritage doesn't work, mixed race doesn't work. Like it's so hard.
Can I just say something as well? Just sorry, because I work with some young people in Newcastle. So I live in Newcastle, and the diversity's changed over the years massively. And some of the young lads I work with or have been in Newcastle since like 3 or 4, but they were born in places like Italy and Spain first, and then they came to the UK after that. And they would say, some of them and their parents will say that they're mixed race, even though both of their parents are from, they could be Ghanaian, from Nigeria, from anywhere, and they'll both be from the same place, but they will describe themselves as mixed race because they were born in a different place. And it's a really interesting conversation with these young lads who have got a Geordie accent and are really dark, and you wouldn't ever associate any Italian features, but they will definitely identify and go, oh no, my mum says I'm Italian. And I'm going, okay. And again, it's all about where you're from and where your parents come from, and why are their parents saying they're Italian. There's lots of things to do with passports and everything that's mixed in with that. Yeah, and I acknowledge that, but I think it always changes when the next generation comes up. The world is getting smaller. That's why this conversation is only going to get harder, because we're all going to be from somewhere. We're all going to be dual heritage. We're all going to have, we can do that DNA test now where you can find out where you're from like centuries ago. So I think that's why it's a really difficult but necessary conversation to have now, because the more we have the conversation and the more flexible we are with words, the easier it will be in the long term, I hope.
Yeah,
sorry, I think what we're doing is mixing the difference between nationality, ethnicity, and race. Race is a social construct. Nationality is not.
But is your I totally agree with you, but I think it depends though, because your nationality, what is nationality? So some of my friends will represent Jamaica, but they've never been, but we're proud to be Jamaican.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
But I'm assuming that would be because their parents were Jamaican, right? It's not like they're from Nigeria and they're just like, yo, I'm Jamaican, what up?
Yeah, no, but that's exactly my point. I think there is some people who will rep Spain or rep Italy or rep anywhere, the younger generation, but have very limited nationality or connection with it, or whatever it is. And it's the same. I bet you've all met someone, a white kid who fully has a Jamaica kit on, or a Ghanaian kid, or whatever, just because that's they identify with that in some sort of weird way. And I totally get what you're saying, and I'm not trying to. I agree with what you're saying. I'm just saying labels are why we get to here we are, and that's about nationality, and that's why when we have this conversation as being mixed race, when we say about being white or black, that is what's mixed in with it. Does that make sense? Why are you white?
Yeah, I guess for me it was just the confusion between having a different nationality and then making yourself mixed race because of that.
But people will want to say that they're dual heritage, even if they're purely one race, I think is what you're saying. So that's why if you were going around saying we all need to use the word dual heritage, some people would then adopt it, that people would say, but you're not dual heritage and you're not mixed race, because they think dual heritage means two races. But he's saying some people feel dual heritage means like two nationalities, like that's why they want to use it. So then like the term doesn't work to cover all of those things.
Yeah, I think both terms have its problems, definitely. You know, as we still speak and we mention race, and I still get like a little twitch, like, are we still talking about the human race, or are we talking about a different race? Still get that twitch. Yeah, but now I kind of see the conversation around dual nationality. That's my passport status right now. Dual heritage. You know, yeah. Can we? Is heritage is culture? Heritage is race. You know, marrying a Ghanaian woman, does that mean my kids are dual heritage? I feel like they are in a way because this is the diversity in the culture can be very different. Maybe in Nigeria as it lives, maybe marrying somebody from a different state with languages being so different could even be classed as
Um,
right.
Eddie, so like I got a little story what kind of I think feels kind of works here, you know. Like about 4 years ago, me and my family for the first time, like amazing trip. We all went to Grenada for the first time. So my family's from Grenada in the Caribbean, right? Um, Maddest holiday we've ever done, right? We went out there for about a month. Um, and while I was out there, I had the maddest like self identity issue ever, right? So like I've lived in the UK all my life. Like the only time I've really traveled out was when I've either gone out to Europe or been gone up and down the UK, right? So I haven't really traveled out that much. So this is my first time over the Atlantic, and like I had this happen to me about 2 or 3 times when I'm out there. But while I'm in Grenada now, um, like remembering that in the UK, I'm black in the UK, right? While I'm in Grenada now, a few times they had a few locals come up to me saying, calling me white boy. So like for me, like that hit me like that sideswiped me about there, you know. So I'm like, yo, wait. So I'm blatantly, I've got Afro hair and not whatnot, and this, that, and the other, you know. But out there, I'm getting called white boy, you know. And like for me, that like sideswiped me, you know. But at the same time, I was a bit like, yo, I understand what's going on. I'm not like I grew up in the UK, you know. And like for me, I think for me it was a bit of a reality check. It was a bit like, yeah, like I grew up in the UK. I've got a UK accent. I can't even put on a Caribbean accent, you know. But that's not to say that my dad's not Grenadian, you know. Like but so they kind of like made me really think deep about this conversation we're having right here. And like the conclusion I got from it, really, it's down to really what you represent yourself as. You know, I think like the thing with dual heritage, like being mixed race and using different words for mixed race and like I've really one thing I've really found is that the reason we're doing this chat right now is because say you're mixed Spanish and German, right? You're not going to be called mixed race. You're not going to be called this, and this. It's this conversation we're having right here. It's all about you're mixed with black and you're mixed with white. That's the thing. What it is, you know, like if you're, it's like an issue, you know, like all my life, whenever had to sign a sheet, you know, like for some kind of identity thing or whatever, like I've always I look at the I look at the sheet and it says British, Caribbean, and you've got to like pick which one you are, or just pick British. You know, like and that's the issue where it is. You know, like dual heritage. It doesn't, like everybody's dual heritage. You know, like you could be completely British. You know, I mean, when I say British, you could be your mum and dad. Or you got two white parents. One parent has got dual heritage because they've got 35%. I don't know. 35% Polish, Irish, and this, that, and the other. And this for me is a problem because you say dual heritage, you're taking the blackness out of there, which is the issue. You know, like it's almost like it's like you say dual heritage, you talk about, especially in the States, they talk about taking DNA tests and this, that, and the other, and the next thing you know, oh yeah, I'm this percent Scottish and this percent you know. But the issue is that when it comes to being dual heritage, black and white, there seems to be a massive. That's where the problem is because it's a mixture of the two. And I think that, like for me, like for me, it's like about, well, this is what I found for myself. I don't know about anything else, you know, but I found that for me to call myself black, like, and not saying mixed race or this dual heritage or BAME or whatever, it's taken a lot of soul searching to figure out who am I and who do I want to represent within myself, you know. And I feel for me it's a bit like, all right, well, I'm not gonna just I'm black, you know. Like if I'm gonna walk down the street and I know that someone's gonna follow me if I go into a shop or something, like I've got particular stories. I was on a like I'm dual heritage, right? But when I went on a Euro trip, I got kicked off at Euro trip because I was singled out as a black man. They needed someone to point the finger at, and they chose me, and they kicked me off the whole trip. You know, and like that was a straight up, they put a finger on somebody, they threw it on me, you know. And that wasn't because I'm dual heritage or mixed race. It's because I'm black. They saw me as a black person and they decided to stereotype me to throw me off, you know. Like for me, if there's a possibility of me being in that situation, then I'm going to represent myself as a black man.
But I suppose the question is, and that the thing that what we're skating around as well is ethnicity is a different thing, isn't it? And when you fill in these forms, that's what they're asking you, and that's when I sometimes get really offended when what do they mean by ethnicity? Because sometimes it just says black British, sometimes it says mixed race, sometimes so.
Don't work out sometimes.
I
think that conversation just made me realise is that dual heritage is too vague because it doesn't mean mixed race, like those neutral words, so it doesn't work. That's what I just think from all of that conversation.
And I just thought I'd just say I looked up heritage because I wanted to see the definition of it, and one of it is property that may be inherited or inheritance, and a special individual or possession. So sometimes it's good to look at the definition of a word. It might help, it might not, but actually they're just words at the end of the day. But if we build our whole identity on these words and then all of a sudden it means something else, like you mentioned, Michael, about half caste, you built your whole identity around what you were, and then when you went somewhere else or got into another conversation, you're like, oh, we're not allowed to say that anymore, and it means it affects your whole identity. And really, even just as an ex-dancer, an injured dancer, my whole identity was being Lady T, was like being a B-girl. I'd found hip-hop, you know, I was accepted, and then I lost that identity because I was injured, but I haven't lost me. And I think that's why sometimes we have to really think about the labels we give ourselves, because at some point, as you've said, Lee, when you went away into another culture, people like rocked your identity. So I suppose that's what's so difficult, isn't it, with being mixed as well, because you're like, where do you find yourself? Who are you? And you're trying to spend your whole life trying to make up who you are and find out who you are. And it's based on labels, being a male, being a woman, being a, you know, dancer, being that, and then it only takes one comment that then knocks your whole identity, and you've got to do soul searching and find out who you really are. Then you hope would boil down to being a human, and you think you're human until someone reminds you that you're a human of colour. And it rocks you again, like with the Black Lives Movement. I was quite happy just being a woman, an angry woman, bumbling along, might be made redundant, and then all of a sudden I was reminded that I was a black woman, and I was in denial for a bit because I was just being me. So identity,
I think it comes down to that thing as well of that thing of, you know, it's you can say dual heritage, you can say mixed race, you can say whatever spin you want to put on it. But the way I look at it is, I think, you know, you're either Caucasian or you're not. And, you know, and I have Caucasian blood in me, but I'm not a Caucasian. Therefore, I identify as black. And that suits me down to the ground. You know, when I went to Sierra Leone when I was a little boy and I got off that plane and I arrived in Africa, I felt something, you know. Saying that, when I went to Ireland, where my mum's from, and I went and saw the green fields, I felt something there as well. So I'm both of those things. But when I go to Ireland, I'm a black man in Ireland. Do you know what I mean? It's either you either Caucasian or you're not. And I think that the, dual heritage, mixed race, BME, blah, 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 they're all over here, and then you've got Caucasian here. So it's one or the other. And the minute you mix it, you come on this side. And I just find it more comfortable to identify as Black, because when I was a kid growing up, all my heroes were Black. Tommy Smith and John Collis at the Olympics, Muhammad Ali, they were people who I thought, God, these people seem to have real integrity. Maybe because they were under such struggle, I could see real integrity. And there wasn't anybody in white society or white entertainment who I looked at and I thought, wow, you make me feel really proud. And the people who made me feel really proud were the Black people. And that's why maybe that side of me, that's maybe why I identify as that, because I've just seen, because of maybe the struggle Black people have had to go through, the dignity and the power and the strength that I've seen them exhibit, the people who I think are like icons exhibit, I've gravitated towards that, and I want to try and be in that image and stand on their shoulders and and be Black, because there's a pride in that. I don't feel any pride at all about being born in England. I like coming from Newcastle. I'm a proud Geordie, but I don't feel any pride at all about coming from England. But I do feel a pride in my Blackness,
Do you think that's because you've been oppressed, though? Sorry, do you know, like, if because of the racism, because of the daily struggle? Because sometimes that's why I identify with, when you see people who you can identify with, who've been through that struggle, that they've possibly had to work just as equally as hard than the next person because of the prejudice or the other things that they go through. So sometimes you do go, oh, to see someone on a pedestal, especially when you talk about Ali or any of those people like from the 70s, or how hard it would have been then to now. I feel that pride, but I'm equally proud to be both. So that's why I ask you that question. Yeah,
I think different people feel it different ways. I think with me, it's just you see those people go on like that, and you think, right, well, I'm going to do my best to go on like that. I'm gonna take a side, and I'm gonna stand on that side, and I'm gonna use any influence I can to try and make things better for people of color. Because it is a case of you're either Caucasian or you're not. That's the way I view the world.
Natasha?
There's a phrase in coaching which is, people like people who are like them or like how they want to be. And I know when I've seen a little brown kid, she suddenly looked at me at like maybe about 3 years old, looked at me and was like, knew that I look like her. We start to look and start to realize that as kids. So we start to look for people who look like us, same eyes, same. So we look for that familiarity. So I say to you, as if there'd been more role models that look like you might have identified with a doctor, a lawyer, the local teacher. But we could probably ask around here, and loads of our same role models are going to be like Martin Luther King, going to be Muhammad Ali, because that's what they were. That's all there was. Whereas actually, hopefully, in the generations coming up, they'll be like, oh, Obama. Everyone's like Michelle Obama, because they exist in more society now, because we're looking naturally, even from a young age, for people who look like us. And as soon as we look to them, we're like, I like that. And then you identify with their personality, what they've been through, and then you can go, we've got a similar story. And I think that's how deep role models go, and how important it is that there are more.
But I do believe, with, in terms of, sorry, this is mad of a Zoom chat. I don't know who I'm talking to. I do think that as well. That what you said right there goes right into ingrained racism in general. Like you think about the whole premise of people using like idols like Jesus and this, that, and the other, painting his face white when he blatantly wasn't, and throwing him all over throwing him all over every single church around the world, as this white, blonde-haired, blue eyes guy, when, I mean, Jesus, I'm using that as just the blatant, obvious example, but when you look deeper into that situation, you're right that every single time you watch TV and you see, and every time you watch TV, etc., you see all the white faces are all or in high professions, they're all doctors, lawyers, this, that, and the other. But when you look in real life, that is the same case. But black and brown people are also in them high positions, but we're not portrayed that like that. Obviously, there's big changes made to that, but you don't see that happening in media, really, you know. And I think that's the thing what needs to be thought here. Like, I do find that in terms of looking at role models, that Black people have always dominated the entertainment business, you know, like 95% of music is Black music, you know, like there's no disputing that. So I'd find that if there are role models as well, the same in sports, in arts, etc., that my majority of Black people will aspire will be in them roles, you know, like, you know, when I think about, like, even in my own circle in hip hop, you know, like, you see, like, well, actually, no, I'll pick a sport like basketball, right? When you look at basketball, like 90%, well, there's a big percentage of the people in that sport who are Black, who come from inner city, you know, and you got like a big percentage of them trying to squeeze through a tiny gap to make it pro in this sport, you know. Like, the percentage of you making it pro in any sport is small, you know. And then you've got like this massive percentage of very talented people trying to go for this like minuscule thing, you know, millions of people trying to go through a thing what will probably fit like a few thousand through, you know. It's crazy. Yet I think if there was more role models, it'll for different avenues. I think that will definitely give people different aspirations to hit different things, you know. Like,
yeah, because my question would be like, what made you pick basketball? And I played basketball as well. What made you pick basketball over golf, tennis, squash, water polo?
That's it. Yeah, I mean, like, straight up for me, it was like, well, for me, to be honest, it was my family. For me, like, because I used to, my cousin used to play ball, you know, so like I was like, oh, I want to get onto that. And then through that, he used to be an MC, so I got into hip hop from there. And then my access into hip hop, it was another Black man called Sean. He used to write. He was part of TDK crew in Sheffield. So they was graph writers, b-boys. Used to travel up and down UK. They were close affiliated with SPAC 19. They used to. They went up and down UK performing, writing, this, that, and the other, and that was my entry into hip hop, you know. And then but like it was all through Black role models, you know, which is a beautiful thing. Like, but I do feel like for there to be really big changes, you need more role models in different areas.
I agree. I was going to say, on this whole like sports thing, like where I grew up, secondary school, there was a rowing team, and I used to row. So my white mom she was a GB rower, like she rowed for Great Britain, and I got into the Great Britain team as a junior. There were no Black girls rowing, like there were none, and I rowed for my first year at uni, and then I wanted to go out all the time. Like, I love music, I didn't want to row, I want to get up early. Like, there was that, and I got injured and stuff like that. But I remember being in this rowing environment where I was good, and I just thought, this is not me. Like, this is not, like, there's no Black people here. Like, and it was just a weird feeling because it was always at the back of my mind. So it's like exactly what you're saying. Like, basketball, so many Black figures. Like people probably stereotype that you'll be good at basketball because you're Black. Like, whatever. Like, people to do that because of rowing. But then I also know people who. So I know a Black girl now who was like meant to be going to Tokyo 2020. And she wants to be that change. Like, she wants to be that person that's going to be there for other Black girls to look up. Because why can't they do that sport? Like, it is elitist because you have to have money to do it and stuff like that. Yeah. But like, why can't they? And it's because literally what you just said. Like, when you don't see yourselves in the roles, you don't think you can do it. And then I was going to say, come back to Tom's point. Like, when you said like you're either Caucasian or you're not, I think I completely agree. Like, I think because history has given us these figures. The mixed race figures who we look up to, they have come out and they've made their achievements as a Black person. Like, they have got there as a Black person, even though they're mixed race. Like Obama, like you said, like ages and ages at the start of this whole call, like he is mixed race, but he was the first Black president. So like, if people keep getting to these places in sports and get into these places, these are like professional and these like high authority and like successful places, even if they're mixed race, it's too late to carve like this new mixed race identity that you're going to look up to and say, yes, I'm mixed race. You're going to keep on looking up to the black one because that's what you look like, and you're never going to look like the white person unless you literally pass as white. So why would you choose that? You have to choose the black identity. Like it's definitely the most appealing. It's definitely the thing you want to be proud of. So yeah, I think it's almost like too late for there to be this like, oh well, they were the first mixed race person to do that, because they never are. That's never what it's called. They're called the first black person to do that because it is Caucasian or it is black.
Yeah.
And is
Then
that a problem?
what's it like for black people to constantly see mixed race people in all the top positions, all the boardrooms, you know, representing them like I don't know if I said when we were live, my dad always says, you know, I don't want you guys, you mixed race people, talking about my issues and leading the campaign for me because you're my children, you're not black. And actually, what does it mean to constantly see like mixed race people at the top going, oh yeah, they're black, and they're like, oh well, what about us, because we're not getting the doors open because we're
That is another
That's
issue as well.
the privilege thing.
Yeah, like that is a big problem. Like for example, you got the whole thing. Even like within black culture, there is the thing of a whole dark skin, light skin situation as well. Both are black, but like next thing you know, like they're treating light skin heads as more attractive because of the black white situation and fat going in there. It's like, I'm trying not to swear, but it's fucked, yo. Like it's so like we've just, I gotta laugh sometimes because like it's almost comedic when, you know. But yeah, I think it's just,
I think it's really sad that black people will feel kind of upset that a mixed race that they feel like a mixed race person will have got where they've got because of the white in them, when that mixed race person really just wants to represent their blackness and it's not their fault. But then we do need to acknowledge the light skin privilege because we do have it. We've all, I don't know, I'm speaking on my, like, we've experienced it. But it's almost a conflict because like I'm not going around saying oh I'm better because I'm mixed. Like I don't want that. So like it's really frustrating when you get a bit of like resentment for something you didn't ask for, and like yeah, it's what do you like? How do you counter it?
Do you think the light skin privilege applies to women more than men?
No, I don't.
A little bit. I think so. Like I'm loving life now. When I was at school, like all my blonde haired, blue eyed girls would get all the boys. I was like down the bottom of the pecking order. I'm loving it now. I could walk in a room and everyone's like, oh yeah, flavour of the month. I'm like, yeah. And it took me to nearly 40. I'm married, doesn't matter anymore. But you know, I don't mind this privilege. I've been waiting for it a long time, and I definitely can say, as a mixed race woman, like my time has come and I'm loving it. And I still experience racism, but it's definitely a lot better than all the men that I meet.
So I do think it's different, just, and that's why I asked the question, just because in the sense of that, from my personal experience, when I was younger, I wanted to be whiter. As I got into my teens, I got comfortable and I was like, oh yeah. Then I got into my 20s and I was like, oh, I wish I was darker. Just because of the experience of like what we've all said about when you're mixed race, dual heritage, all that thing about like who likes you, where do you fit in, that going back, I think about being black enough, not being white enough. I just think it's about being who we want to be, and I think that's what I always think's always interesting about this conversation is when you become comfortable in your skin, that makes it easier for you anyway. But no one ever tells us that. No one ever says to you, be who you want to be. We always have to have the conversation, which side, pick a side. And I always remember I teach drama for young children in Newcastle. And about 4 years ago, a young mixed race girl came over and we'd been working together for a week. And it was lunchtime and she came over and she said to us, Michael, I was like, yes. She went, are you mixed race? I was like, yeah. And she was like, oh, I'm mixed race. I went, oh, I presume so. and she sat for the next hour and a half over her lunch, just asking us questions. And they weren't like really like deep questions, but she just said, "Oh, I've never met a mixed race person before, apart from my sister." That made me change the way I view my
Yeah.
heritage, my privilege, all that sort of stuff, because we can have these conversations, but we have to remember, I think we should be constantly having these conversations, and we should always be saying to people, yeah, I'm proud to be mixed race, because there is always people behind us who are mixed race. But I don't think the conversation necessarily gets pushed to the forefront about being mixed race. It's always about, like you said, being Caucasian or not. And I think when we forget that nuance, because this is what when we talk about anything, it's always nuanced, isn't it? We need to remember that them people, or kids, or whoever, that's what we need to be discussing a little bit.
I come to question the problem surrounding, you know, as an artist, I've always been, you know, I did my tax the other day and realized how much money I've made from being a tick box, you know, which was okay. But I come to question, you know, why people that might be of that complexion might find it problematic that everyone is lumped into this blackness, but the people that are selected and supported more, those that are mixed race. You know what I'm saying? So it's the conversation of privilege and the issues that extend from that privilege, issues which essentially push those of a darker complexion a little bit lower in some cases. You know where I'm going with this.
So this is now a conversation of colorism, which has a high prevalence in any place that's been colonized for a long time, and that kind of goes back to what Lee was saying about his experience in Grenada and in the Caribbean, where we'd be regarded as high color because of our proximity to whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
I think colorism, while it is a similar conversation to racism, is quite different, because obviously we're the sort of privileged ones in conversations of colorism.
Yeah, definitely. I think because colorism is like about the attitudes within the same race as well. So like you even have your like South Asians discriminating against the darker Asians. And where does that come from? Like they are literally the same genetic makeup and racism.
British Empire rule.
Yeah, and
pretty much it's just as spreading ideas of white beauty.
It is something that needs to be stamped out, this idea that because we have whiteness in us, that makes us better. It is, but at the same time, like what you were saying about like what you went through at school, like I went through like no one thought I was attractive, bottom of the pile thing, and having racism still now from older people who should know better. So I can't then, when I get opportunities, like take black people saying to me, "Oh, but you don't have it as bad," because I have had it as bad. So that it's just hard. It is a weird one, because you do get it as bad, but then you also don't. So like recognize like you've had the same pain in some aspects. Maybe they need to see that, like some people who accuse you of not having anything need to understand that most of the time you have had that like pain and that experience. But also know that there'll be instances where people are more accepting of you. You are more palatable to people, and that needs to be changed somehow. And I think the way it does change is like what they're trying to do with like beauty standards, like put dark skinned people at the front of things instead of always putting mixed race people. Like in your adverts, there's so many mixed race families, and it just seems tokenistic. But then again, like mixed races, it's like the largest growing population. So like it does make sense to turn on your TV and see a mixed race family. So like yeah, representation really matters, like in the media and whatever. But people need to understand each other's experiences. Like they need to understand that mixed race people are still not. They're still not Caucasian. They still have the like prejudice against them. Just because they're palatable to some people doesn't mean that they haven't had the same inequalities in their life.
I think it's a natural human thing though, because I'm a physio, and if someone's broke their arm, someone else has broke their arm, and they'll compare how bad each other's break were and how painful it was, and my pain's worse than your pain. So it's a bit, I think it's based on the fact that people just want to be heard, and they're not being heard by anyone. So it fundamentally boils down to they'll always compare experiences.
That's
But
a
it's
good
actually-
point. Can I talk on that point there?
Yeah.
Like when I just keep bringing it back to school, because like that's just like that's just where I'm at in my head with this. But like me as a kid, when I was in school, I was a very quiet kid. So I was the kind of kid who'd just get bullied and whatnot. You know, like I wasn't very outspoken. It took me a minute to find my voice properly. So people took the piss of me pretty much back in the day. But in general, in my school, you know, in terms of like for kids, hierarchy in school, however you say it, I can't even say it, I can't talk today. Hierarchy, what's that? What would happen is when I'd look at like the quote hard kids in my old school, the quote hard kids in my old school were all mixed race, black and white. They were the hard kids back in like when I was like in growing up back then, right? And what I found was like it was almost like the mixed race the mixed race kids in my school were all the ones who had like whenever there was a race issue in the school, it was against a mixed race black kid. Like a lot of the like fully Caribbean or African kids were mostly quiet back in school, in my school anyway. Like they were mostly quiet and mostly just got on with the work and this, that and the other. And what I found was like they was mostly getting bullied by the white kids, and you know what I mean, it was a weird kind of like balance what went on like that. And I found that after school, a lot of them same people went on to like either got out of that circle and continued to do whether it was sport, whether it was like just got on with the work. But like thinking back to a lot of the kids who got into situations and unfortunately didn't make it were mixed race, and whether that were down to police, down to things that just happened out of school, what couldn't, you know, I found out that like, and I've always kind of like had this kind of like thought in my head that is a lot of it has been down to trying to almost overplay your blackness in a way, you know, like it's also like down like a big issue of a lot of it is like down to like self-identity and this, that and the other, you know, like trying to play being like it's weird, like it's a really weird kind of hard thing to talk on for me, you know, like because like it's almost like the same conversation as me growing up watching basketball, trying to be this basketball player, talking American, like that whole stereotype of quote bad black people, drug dealers, and this, that, and the other. There was a big circle of kids who were trying to play up to that, and that led them on to different things, you know. I don't know.
Do you think, because I don't know about anybody else, has anyone ever been taught about like playing up your blackness or playing up to ethnicity or colourness or anything? Has anybody ever been identified in their race? Because that happens to me quite a lot, because my dad's Jamaican and my mum's white. Sometimes when obviously I've got the beard at the minute, I sometimes get people think I'm a Muslim, or I've been into a shop and someone have said that like they spoke Punjabi to ways, or I've even had someone, this is when I was a little bit younger, had a girl come up to us and ask us if I was from somewhere in Israel. She said, she went, "Oh, you look like this," and I was like, "No." So I often get being mixed race so categorized in other categories, and I just didn't know if that's just my experience or if anyone else has had that sort of.
I always think I know where everyone's from. Like if I saw you, I'd be like black and white. But people really don't. But the only experience I've had is a really old lady asked me if I was from India. And I laughed because I just thought I just don't look Indian, like I've got really afro hair. But she didn't, she was old, like she didn't know.
It was an eyesight.
It was the black, yeah, it was just the brown skin. And I think she'd lived in India or something. So she was like, oh, this brown skinned girl, like maybe she's from India, kind of thing. That's my only experience.
It's interesting to say, I think on both sides, I can see, I think there's facial structure as a thing. My nieces and nephews who, my brother's wife is, she's Indian heritage, and see the similarities to and why maybe, and for yourself, Michael, I can see, and I base that on facial structure more than anything. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I get it all. So it's gone all the way through my life. I think it's really interesting, and I've met other people who have mixed race. Who I know some people who come when they're mixed race, they're so light skinned that sometimes they pretend that they're not mixed race, and they say things like they might be Italian or they can say that they've got a tan. I just think it's interesting. Like, and I know some people who do only say whether they're Caucasian or not. I think they sometimes can be mixed race. I know people who've said they are Caucasian. So I just think when we talk about mixed race and ethnicity and all that, I think it's sometimes from the people who I can see on my screen, we probably are representative of the majority, but there's sometimes those other quirks of people who I think are equally as interesting.
I got frustrated before when I've seen like a very light skinned person, and I know they're mixed race, and I've said to a white person, oh yeah, they're mixed race, and they're like, no, they're not. And I just feel so defensive because I feel like I've experienced someone being really angrily like, no, they're not, and it made me feel really annoyed because I thought, like, why do you not want them to be? Like, what's the problem with it? And I was like, well, am I just being paranoid, or like, but they were just like not accepting, they wouldn't accept it, kind of thing. And I was like, but I know they are. And then I had another argument where I said to someone, oh well, mixed race people can have like blonde hair, like genes work in weird ways, and they were like, no, they can't, it will be dyed. Like all this like weird attitude towards what we might look like, and what like, and I just it's like, that's kind of like on the lines of you saying like mixed race people can look like anything. And I'm just like, and I wish more white people realize that before they decide that their ideas of whiteness are white, and that like they have to be white. Like,
does anyone think we're being sold an image of mixed race now on the TV? So for me, it's like, obviously we went for a stage where it was like light skin, green eyes, that's really popular, and then afro hair. Like I don't have afro hair, and it's like every image of a light skinned black woman has big hair now. Or a weave, and I'm never going to have that. So I'm glad I'm not a young person anymore, because I know that my identity would have been wrapped up in having, like, I knew I wanted afro hair for years. I even wanted afro hair, and it was like in between. So now I look at it and I'm like, another mixed race person, big afro, another mixed race person, big afro.
But like hair for mixed race girls is like such a big thing in itself, because I've always hated my hair. But that was only because it didn't look like any of my friends, and people touched it all the time, and they said it was weird and stuff like that. So I was wanting straight hair and like cut like hair like yours, or like just not so like obviously ethnic hair kind of thing. And now like I don't care about I like my hair. I have it like this, have it in braids, whatever. But I think it is really interesting. Like I think I needed to see girls with afros on TV, and I never did. And I see them now, and I think, oh my god, their hair's really nice. Why did I hate mine all through my teen years? So yeah, it's hard. I think like it is a good effort. It's a good step seeing more afros in the media. For me,
unless you don't have afro.
Unless you don't, exactly. So it's literally different, individual to everybody.
Can I ask before we ask for some sort of positive conclusion? Can I ask? I'll go to Tom first. The term, and not to sit on this too long because we've been quite heavy on terminologies. what happens if I put paradox next to BAME, so it becomes BAME paradox? What does that sing? What does that say to you on the first glance?
BAME paradox. It's
Is it a negative statement towards the Black community? Is it a positive? What does it do? How does it ring?
I mean, the way it rings with me is it doesn't really ring with me. With me, it's like I said, from where I sit, you're either Caucasian or you're not. And if you're not, you're Black. The way in this discussion, that's the way I see it, you know. It's not a case of dual heritage where, you know, a German marries a Norwegian and they come and live in Newcastle and their children are viewed as dual heritage and they go through what I went through when I was at school, because that isn't going to happen. You know, so to me, it's a bit of a black and white world. You know, that's the way I sort of see it. So the whole BAME thing, I you know, when people say I'm BAME, I'm like, oh, I just, you know, for me it's just black. You know, that's the way I'm old school. You know.
Yeah, as we live in this world of the terminology heavily used, what happens when you put paradox next to it? What does it do to it?
I'll let someone else take it, because like I say, it's just the whole, whenever I hear any term other than black, I'm just sort of, I don't switch off, but it just doesn't ring with me, you know, because when the police arrest any of us, you know, when the police stop and search and arrest any of us, they're stopping black people. Do you know what I mean? They're not stopping BAME, they're not stopping dual heritage, they're stopping you because you're black, and they've messed with me my whole life for being black. So I'm all right, I'm going to sit with it, you know, and so that's where I'm at, you know.
Yeah, and
take it or not.
like I've said before, I run the BAME network in University of Warwick, and it's not particularly well attended. There's 6,000 staff, and we're lucky if we get 10 in a room. But we're in the Racial Equality Task Force group, there's loads of people. And actually the conversation that keeps coming up over and over again is, when is the university going to do statistics that actually represent and actually show the figures that there's still marginalized groups within the BAME community. So, for example, the BAME box also covers international students and international lecturers who are coming over here to study. And it ticks that boxes of everybody. They're coming over here to study. They're not living here. They've not been here all their life. And their situation is, they still experience racism, but their situation is very different to the people who grew up here. And the marginalized communities that we keep noticing still are the Black community, Black Caribbean, and Bangladeshi. So if we don't break down those groups, we're never going to realize who the most underrepresented across all communities and all professions are. However, I think that in a lot of the conversations I've had over the last couple of weeks is that people are starting to get bogged down about the BAME terminology, when actually we should be using it as an opportunity to come together with people of colour and have these conversations, instead of arguing about who should be representing us and who should be having a voice and who shouldn't, which I think is starting to become more of the topic. Then actually the issue is we're treated differently because we're not Caucasian, which I love, Tom. I love that, because we're not that, so we feel different. But also, if you're from a different country and you come to this country, you're going to experience discrimination at times for your accent, for your culture.
Thank you for sharing that. Can I just ask you again? Taking the word BAME and adding the word paradox next to it. How does that ring for you, Natasha? Just as
it kind of means that I'd need to Google another word to find out really what it means, and I know, because I know it features in the Guardian now, so therefore I know that it's another construct that we're going to have to talk about because it's a new popular term. Whereas actually I don't care about terms. I just want us to get in a room and have the conversation and start inviting Caucasians to the conversation so they can hear our experience and we feel listened to, and we can make massive change in this world.
I feel like we try and find so many different reasons to derail the conversation of racism. Like, let's talk about the culture war. Let's talk about the word BAME. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about that. No, there are plenty of statistics. There are plenty of studies. There's so much that people can go out and research and understand. And then we can have a real conversation and talk about how to move forward. And I think sometimes we're kind of missing the point when we start to talk about all these other different factions, all these other different words and all these other different reasons. There's like serious systemic change needs to happen as soon as possible. That's kind of my take on the whole thing.
How can we set up the change? Sorry, G.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel like race is the real paradox, like not the word babe. Because as long as white people use race to make them supreme, and keep supremacy running in institutions and systemically, then that's the absolute ultimate issue. So it's more like if we can get everyone accepting that race is more of a construct, and that's why we need equality, and that's why Black Lives Matter, then we'll be on like some kind of progressive path. But I guess the terminologies feed into the conversation. But yeah, they're like Callum just said, it's like it's overemphasized, and then it detracts from the real paradox.
I totally agree with when you say Black Lives Matter. I think that's for me, that's what made me feel really proud about the movement. It felt like a movement. It felt organic. It felt like it came out of such a tragedy, and then to have it's good that we have all these conversations. But I think whenever we have this debate about race or about culture, about anything, it should always be with the, like you say, the attitude, well, there has been lots of things that have done wrong. How can we move forward and change them? How can we make things better for each other? Let's not worry about what word we use. As long as we can agree it's not an offensive word or offensive words, can we move forward? So like we say, can we be BAME? Can we be this? Whatever. As long as we're having the conversation, not about the words, not about are we BAME this or are we dual heritage, whatever. I know we spent a lot of time talking about it, and I think it's a different conversation when you are talking about you as a mixed race or a dual heritage person. I think that's an interesting debate because I've never had a conversation with so many people about it. This will be the first time. But when we're actually talking about a movement or trying to change something, I think we shouldn't try to focus on it because it really doesn't matter. Change is what really matters.
100%. Like I agree with that. Like for me, like who came up with the term BAME? Like I don't know. I need to do that research. But like for me, it sounds like a word just to say if you're not Caucasian, you're BAME. But what it sounds like to me, you know.
That's essentially what it is. But
But
that's what it is. That's what it means.
Yeah. Well, let me finish. This is what I'm saying. So, like for me, like using that word, it's just a way of just putting like how much of a percentage of the world is that, you know? Like if you want to really think about the percentage of people who like the BAME community is pretty much like a massive percentage of the world, you know? Like it's just a word that just kind of doesn't really help anything for me, you know? Like, and that's the issue. Like it's thinking, like listen to everybody talk on it just now and like thinking about it for myself, from my point of view. Like I've kind of, for me, it's a bit like with the Black Lives Matter stuff kicking off, right? And people trying to force arguments to create real change. And then the next thing you know, the BBC just start taking off anything and everything, like cancelling shows where people put on a face mask. It's not blackface, it's just a face mask of somebody, you know, like it kind of falls into that kind of argument. It's like, it's just something put there to make people argue with each other and not actually come to the conclusion about what's going on, you know? Like, I think that, like, it's like talking about, like say, about BAME, to me, just sounds like it's just, it doesn't, for me, like, create any solid ground for me, you know? Like, for me, it's about, like, if there's an issue within the Black community, let's deal with that issue in the Black community. If there's an issue in the Asian community, you know, like whether it's like West or East Asia, you know, Oriental or, you know what I mean? Like if there's an issue there, let's deal with that issue, you know? Like
the issue's not there, the issue's everywhere. And if you can imagine that, say for example, in the University of Warwick, 6,000 staff, only I think 17% are BAME. That's BAME. That's like a group of people that are not Caucasian. 17%. Let alone how many of those are mixed race, let alone how many of those are Black. So it's like, even when you lump us all together, we're still a minority and we're experiencing things that we can't even come together as a community to address the real issue, which is that we are treated differently and there are barricades and challenges in the way of everything we try to do to succeed.
Mm.
And I think that's why it's important to have something like that. But then also, you're right, 100% right, all of you. It detracts from the real issue.
All right, but
Sorry.
go for it. Keep
I think
interrupting.
there needs to be like BAME lives matter, like Black lives matter, Asian lives matter. Like if you like, otherwise some people obviously we've got the street like all lives matter people who don't understand the point. But then like people are going to start saying, oh, well, why don't Asian lives matter? Like BAME matters, but like you said, like you still need to break it down, or the problems aren't getting addressed in the right way because the problems are different. And like the Black Lives Matter is from a black man dying, like George Floyd, the American black man. So like this makes sense in this context. But at the same time, like if you're open-minded enough, you're not going to shut yourself down to the fact that there is an issue for BAME people, even if you don't like the word, across the board, because like Asian people get discriminated against awfully. Like it's the same. It's almost the same. Like, well, I don't know. I wouldn't say it was worse. I wouldn't say one was worse. So like you can't like, oh, I don't want to get rid of the word BAME if it's going to help include certain people, like you said, like in Warwick, like you have that group for that reason, because you have like your people with immigrants who need they need protection as well. So like I don't think the word BAME is not harmful. It's just the fact that we still need to make the distinctions between the groups to get the accurate like help out. If that makes sense.
I want to say, thanks for sharing that. I want to say, leave you all with the last question. What does change look like? What does change look like? Somebody's blowing up my bell. What does change look like? And leave us with a positive message towards change. What does change look like? And leave us with a positive message to conclude towards change. We've already gone over time, and but that's okay, because we are time and we have time. What does change look like alongside a positive message? Guy, can I come to you first?
What does change look like? Change. Change looks like it's on its way. If it sounds positive. Change looks like it's on its way. See how I like put the two, link them together? You know, like that's me.
Natasha?
I've been part of some amazingly powerful conversations over the last couple of weeks, and this is our time. The evolution of technology has allowed us to connect in a way that we've never been able to connect before, to build networks we've never been able to network before, to have role models in places we never knew existed before. And the more we connect, the more we support each other, the more we lift each other up, the more we can just be great human beings, working on our own self-belief and our own identity to just be really good human beings that will help then lift everyone around us, and then it will allow us to get into more rooms, sit at more tables, and have more of an influence than ever before. So in short of Lee is like, actually, yeah, it feels like the change is now. Let's make it happen.
Michael?
For me, I think that it's about, we have more in common than we don't, is the message to everybody, in that not getting stuck into your own small beliefs that don't really matter. So let's not argue about the small things. Let's argue about the really big things. Like if someone does die on the street, why that's so wrong. Let's not worry about anything else, but let's just all agree that that was wrong and that something needs to be changed. That should be the message, and it should be across the board, whether that is institutionalized racism, where people don't get jobs because of their name, or where black people are getting a high percentage of stop and search, but they have the lowest number of actual drugs on them. Why are these statistics not getting out to everybody? Why do people still believe in these old stereotypes? And I think that we can change it, and I think, like you say, change is coming, and we can all be a part of it. The more we speak out and the more we talk.
Thank you for sharing that. G?
I think change to me will be people being more empathetic to each other, because even within races, if you looked to just listen to someone's experience before forcing your like prejudgment on them, you're going to learn more, and you're going to be able to work together better. And that's what I've seen more of with the Black Lives Matter movement. White people willing to read up the definition of white privilege that they wouldn't have done before, and it just comes from empathy. And I think the younger generation is more into this like empathetic intelligence, because they're more that sounds kind of rude to older people, but I know like it's not a massive, like some, like your age, like people are different ages, but if you said to a younger person, oh, read this, I think this, read this article about it, they'll be like, okay, rather than like, no, I'm obstinate about, like, I'm stubborn about like this already. So I just think change is going to come from us being more empathetic, and yeah, and just realizing we need to actually, everyone has a unique experience. Even if you look like someone, you might have look exactly the same as someone, you might have had a completely different experience. So like listening, being empathetic, like that's change. That's going to be change to me.
Thank you for that. But Tom?
Change. I'm gonna go off point here and say change is not coming. Change is not coming at all. The idea of change is coming and it's just over the horizon. No, it's not. It's an uphill battle. You know, at the minute, it seems like we have momentum because let's say we're a car, we seem to be moving, the Black Lives Matter movement, we're moving forward rapidly because everyone's behind us. But we have to remember, historically, we're pushing this thing uphill. Do you know what I mean? So change is only going to come if we do what we did today and tomorrow we go out and we do twice as much again and we keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And in terms of role models that will bring us change, I'm looking at them. I'm looking on this screen, I see the role models that will bring us change. Each of us inside ourselves. You know, you're not a role model until you don't realize you're a role model till you get really old. Do you know what I mean? You're role models right now. We're role models to young kids, young dual heritage kids, young black kids, young white kids. We are role models to them, all of us, in our own lives. And we have to conduct ourselves with grace, with strength, and we have to remember that we are fighting a battle, and change will only come if we double our efforts tomorrow. That's what I would say.
Powerful. Thank you very much for that. Callum, also touch on what you have going on, the live stream you have going on as well towards the end of your...
So for me, change looks like looking at the disproportionate deaths of Black people in police custody, the stop and search figures, and saying, let's take action to defund the police. It means looking at the expulsion rates of Black people in schools and the underassessment of Black people aged 5 and 11, and the fact that we're less likely to be entered into tier exams, and saying, let's reform the education system. It looks like looking at our own implicit biases and doing the necessary research to educate ourselves and deconstruct those implicit biases. That's what change looks like for me. In terms of positive, I think this is probably the biggest push I've felt in my lifetime towards feeling seen. Social media and stuff like that, I feel like it's the first time that it's not just me, the one that's sharing these things, you know what I mean? And yeah, to an extent, it could just be performative, but I feel like that it's like Tom said, it does feel like the car's moving. And yeah, it is uphill, but I feel like it's in motion, and I've never felt like it's had this speed before. In terms of the things I'm doing, so me, my friend Kofi and Cynthia, we run a Zoom chat called Question Clinic, and we basically just kind of put some sort of topic on the table to do with Black identity that we think needs to be spoken about, that we think people, both Black and white, can benefit from having a conversation on. And we just chat it out, and we have one for general talk, and then we have one for teachers and parents. So that's more focused around raising children or teaching children. Also, my friend Kofi, he has a radio show for Hull, where he is currently discussing a lot of these sort of topics on Monday from about 8 p.m.
It's amazing. Thank you all for joining us. We will, Callum, please share with us links to all you spoke about so we can get it out via Facebook and on YouTube.
Yeah, if you want to just, I'll put my Instagram. It's travel videographer, and then we can just connect. And
perfect. Thank you all for joining us. Next week we'll be back with another conversation. Thank you to all our guests. Thank you to everyone that's joined us and stayed with us throughout the. On YouTube it says 104 minutes of conversation. Beautiful. I've learned from because I'm not a dual heritage or mixed race individual myself, so I've learned from listening. Yeah, thank you all for joining us once again. I guess we can now go off live.